pirates, or just women banding together for a common cause, I've got some really good recommendations to get you started in this video. The first book that I wanted to talk about is Bandit Queens by Perini Schroff. Gita's husband disappeared 5 years ago, and in the small village where she lives, the assumption is that Gita is the one who made him disappear. When the word gets out about Gita's unearned reputation for making husbands disappear, some of the other wives in the village come to her for help with their own abusive relationships. This plot has some really absurd twists and turns, but it's folded around some really serious and strong elements like female friendship, domestic abuse, trauma, the caste system in India. It just really has a lot packed into the vehicle of this story. I think that this book is just a firecracker of a debut for author Perini Schroff, and I can't wait to see what she writes next. In her afterword, the author wrote, "For me, fiction is when research meets compassion. I believe this is often why facts don't change people's minds, but stories do." I couldn't agree more, and I hope that this book will motivate even more authors to bring to life the stories of historically marginalized people, especially women. The next book that I read also has Queens in the title, but this time we're referring to New York City and 3 really amazing teenage girls. This book is another debut for author E.L. Shen as her first young adult novel, and it's called Queens of New York. 3 17-year-old best friends are preparing for their first summer apart. Our 3 characters are Jai Lee, Ariel Kim, and Everett Wong. Everett is a brilliant triple threat with dreams of Broadway, and she's headed off to a theater camp in Ohio. Ariel is a smart STEM student who is headed off to college early with a prestigious scholarship to a biology program in California. Meanwhile, Jaya is left at home in New York to help her hardworking parents run their dim sum shop in Chinatown, care for her ailing grandmother, and watch over her little sister. This book was so well constructed. I really loved that each chapter we got to switch perspectives between each of the 3 girls, and they're each in very different locations. They have very different dreams, and they also are facing some very unique difficulties over this summer, but their friendship is just so sweet, and I loved the character development and just the camaraderie between the 3 girls that we see in this novel. It would be really refreshing to have more young adult novels that depict healthy young female friendships in this way. I gave this book 4 stars. The next book I want to talk about was a pretty big disappointment, and that's kind of a bummer because it was my buddy read with Chantel Reads All Day, and that was Frenchmans Creek by Daphne du Maurier. This one I kind of feel even uncomfortable putting in the category of a classic. It's a historical romance novel, and I think that the cover that Chantel found is a lot more accurate to the actual story in the book than the beautiful UK edition that I had found, and that's such a disappointment. This story is set in Europe in 1670, where our main character, Donna, is a bored but very privileged white woman in London. She's wealthy, she's well established in society, and she has a husband who isn't ashamed to have her on his arm when they go to places that would normally just be accessible to men. But Donna is discontented. As I mentioned, she's bored. She has desires for independence and adventure that London society just can't satisfy. So in efforts to create some space from her husband, Donna retreats to their vacation home by the sea with her children and a nursemaid. This vacation home is set back away from the sea, and there is a hidden creek that runs from their property into the sea, which is where we get the title of this novel from. Unbeknownst to her and her husband, their vacation home, after being abandoned for several years, has become the temporary hosting space for some mysterious guests in the form of French pirates. These French pirates have been holed up on their land and successfully plaguing the wealthy residents of the powdered wig variety. Donna meets and falls in love with the pirate captain, and the pirate captain grants Donna the independence that she's always wanted in the form of teaching her fishing, cooking chicken over an open fire, and love. Donna fakes an illness in order to continue her secret life with this pirate. She learns about the seafaring life, she loves it, she gets tan and happy. As Donna is drawn deeper into the group of pirates, she is participating with commandeering a merchant ship, she's part of a kidnapping, a jailbreak, and a murder by self-defense. And ultimately, after all this, she's facing the choice of whether to return to her family and turn her back on the wind of this life that she has always longed for, or to set her eyes on a new horizon, tied to the fate of her new French pirate love. Here's the only good things that I can say about this book. The writing is sometimes pretty because it is Daphne du Maurier, but it's not in any way that could resolve the problems with the plot, the dislike of the main character, and such a strangely modern storyline that's set in what would be a really rigid historical context. I couldn't help but feel like I was watching a cheesy black and white movie that was set in the time period but would have had costumes that were grossly not period appropriate, and maybe there would have been some musical elements and dancing. Overall, I felt pretty uncomfortable reading this one, and I couldn't give it more than a generous 2 stars. This next book is one that I remember reading several times as a teenager. I have so many more thoughts than I would have when I first read it, and for that reason, I'm giving it 2.5 stars. This is Pirates by Celia Rees. At first glance, this one would seem like it hits all the basic categories for an authentic pirate novel. We have minimal historical accuracy, there is some very skillful use of nautical terminology, and there's a lot of swashbuckling adventure at the center of this story. One of the things that I think a lot of pirate novels miss on is the overlap between piracy, press gangs, and the slave trade, and this novel covers all 3 of those. For some, joining the crew of a privateer was one of the better of 3 bad outcomes. But in this story, we're not following men, we're following the main character of Nancy. On her father's death, 2 things happen in Nancy's life. First, she is taken to his plantation in Jamaica. Second, she's betrayed by her 2 brothers who have arranged for her to marry a dangerous local man in return for being able to settle their late father's debts. Nancy's only friends in this precarious position are Phyllis and her daughter Minerva, who are working as house slaves in her home. The synopsis of this book says that for both Nancy and Minerva, their only chance at freedom from a life where they're both treated like property is to leave and become pirates. It's a fast-paced adventure story, I'll grant you that, but in today's world, it has a lot to be grappled with. First, even though there's a feminist premise to this novel, there's a lot of hypocrisy here as well. I remembered the book being told from dual perspectives, so we got both Nancy's diary entries and also as dictated to her by Minerva's side of the story. I was seriously disappointed reading it this year and finding out that Minerva didn't get the agency to have her own record. Rather than just throw out problems, if I were to offer a solution, it would be kind of cool if this could be adapted for present day and have someone write the portions that were meant to be describing Phyllis and Minerva's perspectives, and especially when it comes to the lore of their local magic and superstitions. One of the other major flaws that I noticed was that the pirate ships intentionally avoided attacking slave ships. Not because they didn't think that they were up to the challenge of capturing and overtaking them, but because they were concerned about what they were going to do once they did free the cargo, who were human people trapped inside that ship. There were also parts of the story where they mentioned that they were very short on crew on the pirate ship. So it stands to reason that in this book that has very minimal historical accuracy, we could assume they could have done that at least one time and kind of made up the numbers on their ship and also been a little bit better humans for it. But that never happened, not even once. I would have loved if the author stretched a little bit more in the area of human rights and freedoms. Next pirate book. So first off, let's talk about the cover. This has a really beautiful dust jacket, and it has end papers that show the schematics of the ship and even the below decks. The naked hardback is really pretty. It has kind of a faux leather look to it, even though it doesn't feel like that. And there's some nice teal embossing. Actually, my favorite color drew me to this immediately. They even have sprayed edges, which are very trendy right now. And there is a cross-grain ribbon tucked in to use as a bookmark. This book is historical fantasy, so we can go ahead and shove historical accuracy overboard with prejudice. One of the first clues that you're free to do that is that we're following a 17-year-old female pirate captain, and her crew is made up of mostly women. Then we add to that fact that she not only is, as the title declares, the daughter of the Pirate King, but as the second book is titled, the daughter of the Siren Queen. So she has quite a few hidden skills that will be revealed not just in this book, but I'm assuming in book 2. I'll probably mispronounce her name. At the beginning of this story, Alosa is taken hostage by another pirate crew who hope that she will be able to lead them to a legendary lagoon full of sirens and buried pirate treasure. Meanwhile, Alosa knows she's not in the wrong place because she's actually on a secret mission to find a hidden map to the same legendary location that is rumored to have been hidden on this pirate ship. Her father, the Pirate King, has tasked her with finding the map at all costs and bringing it to him to protect the whereabouts of that secret treasure. Alosa is not afraid, not of her imprisonment on the ship or the rough crew and her surround, because her special skills enable her to sneak out and search for the map at will. But she is a little wary of the suspicious and handsome first mate. If you happen to like YA fantasy romance, the main character who is exploring her magical abilities for the first time, I think you might enjoy this one. I personally couldn't hoist a flag of more than 3 stars. If you're meh about ocean travel, but you're yeah about dimensional travel, I would like to recommend to you the Frugal Wizards Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. I'll tell you once and I'll tell you again, I think the real secret of these secret project novels is how accessible they are to people who have not picked up something that is remotely fantasy or Brandon Sanderson before. They're super easy to recommend to people because there's always a lot of tie-ins to cultural things, as in Tress of the Emerald Sea and The Princess Bride. For this one, if you know someone who is a fan of Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or Terry Pratchett and Discworld, I think that they would get a kick out of this story. Dare I say even the Outlander crowd, because we've got some Celtic vibes in here too. This book has dimensional travel, there's some witty dialogue, there's book within a book features, and characters who are discovering the rules and the lore of this world as they go. This book is another beacon to the world of Brandon Sanderson. The highlight of this particular novel is him showing how much he likes to be perceived as funny. And a lot of times it is humorous and other times you might be rolling your eyes a little bit. Okay, so maybe I didn't love it like Tress of the Emerald Sea, but I have to give it 3.5 stars because of how easy it is to recommend. I'm aware that the special edition has more sketches and more footnotes, but I honestly didn't feel like I was missing out on anything, so I would go ahead and grab a standard edition if I were you. This next one is another rando read, and I could recommend it to you if you are a fan of the show Severance, or even the original story that Severance is based on by Ling Ma, or if you've ever had an existential crisis because your workplace messaging has just overtaken your brain space. I'm talking about Several People Are Typing by Calvin Kasuge. This story just takes off immediately from page 1 with no ramp up whatsoever. Our main character, Gerald, is the member of a marketing team that we're following in their workplace Slack. This is a remote-friendly agency, and so when Gerald doesn't show up to work one day and he lets them know that he is stuck in Slack, they don't really think much of it. But I don't mean that he is simply getting bombarded with notifications from Slack or that he's up late responding to work-related messages. No, his consciousness has been accidentally uploaded to Slack. As the days go by, Gerald still hasn't shown up to work in person. His coworkers are initially amused at Gerald's pleas for help in the Slack channels, then they're a little annoyed, and finally one of his coworkers decides to investigate for himself and goes to Gerald's apartment to see if his friend is okay. And the Slack activity gets weirder and weirder. This is a darkly funny, creepy, workplace-centered story, and it's really easy to read. The entire novel is like reading an exchange of text messages. While I didn't feel 100% confident recommending this one to every reader, the premise and the format of the book I think is really intriguing, and I would like to see more of that. So I ended up giving this one 2.5 stars. If you read it, let me know what your thoughts were. If you're thinking about picking it up, just be aware that it is more adult in content than some of the other books in this video. The last book I want to talk about before I say goodbye is Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. This book was a pretty clean romance, but it lacked some sophistication in the plot department. I found that I am really impatient when it comes to books that have a surprise twist that explains away a lot of things that happen in a way that just seems way too contrived. And unfortunately, this one was one of those for me. Unlike our main character, Sadie, who has face blindness, you're able to see the third act breakup and the reason for the twist from miles away. I do think that Catherine Center's writing is solid, and I did find myself caring for whether Sadie was going to make her entry into the portrait competition and find herself in a good relationship, but it just kind of fell flat for me. When I'm reading a book that has an artist as the main character, I'm looking for descriptions of their creative process that make me want to make something after I put down that book. And in this one, when we're in on the process of Sadie figuring out how to paint a portrait with her limited abilities to perceive faces, I didn't feel inspired. It was a little clunky in its description of drawing and painting in general. So all told, I ended up giving this book 2 stars. Well, those are the 8 books that I read in the month of July, and I'd love to hear how your reading has been going this summer. I hope that you have a really great reading month ahead of you. Do you have any recommendations for seafaring books or books that center on strong female friendships that you would recommend to other readers? I always welcome your questions and your ideas for future videos. And if you'd like to see the stack that I have queued up for this next month in August, stick around and click to watch the next video. I'll see you in another video soon.